All right, let's talk about AI. But I want you to forget the chatbots and the cool image generators for a minute. We're going to peel back the curtain and look at the physical, political reality of AI. It's a story of incredible power, huge sums of money, and a whole lot of concrete. And it has some very, very heavy consequences. Let's dive in.
So there are really two AIs. There's the one you see every day, right? The clean interface, the little prompt box, that smooth voice that answers your questions. But then there's the AI you don't see. And that's a world of unbelievable power demand, giant turbine-filled buildings, and massive backroom land deals. This gap between what we see and what's real, that's where our story really begins.
And here's the absolute key to this whole thing. If you really want to get what's going on, you have to shift your whole perspective. The real story isn't happening on your glowing screen. Nope. It's happening in the heavy, gritty infrastructure that makes all that code possible. We have to think bigger, much bigger. So how did we even get here? How did AI become this massive physical industry? Well, it didn't happen by accident. It all started with a very calculated political bet, with some of the biggest names in tech making a huge investment in a political outcome they thought would serve them well. And just look at the players involved. We are talking about the absolute titans of the industry: Amazon, Meta, Google, Microsoft, even Sam Altman from OpenAI. Ahead of a potential second Trump administration, they all sent a lot of money into his orbit. And let's be clear, this wasn't about ideology. This was a practical, strategic investment. And we're not talking about pocket change. The typical buy-in, a cool $1 million from each of them. You think, this isn't some minor scandal on the side of our story. This is absolutely central. It's how this whole arrangement was built from the ground up.
So why'd they do it? What were they hoping to get for their money? Well, the reason was crystal clear. They wanted a state that would roll out the red carpet, a government that would fast-track land deals, greenlight construction, and, most importantly, treat their absolutely insatiable appetite for energy as a top national priority. So, the political bet was made. What was the result? Well, this is the part where the cloud, quite literally, comes crashing down to Earth, taking the form of massive, very real, physical infrastructure. And if you want a perfect picture of this new reality, look no further than Abilene, Texas. An enormous AI campus was built there. But it wasn't just servers. It came with its own dedicated, on-site 900-megawatt power plant. Suddenly, AI wasn't an abstract idea anymore. It was an industrial landscape of concrete, fencing, and a private fuel supply.
This brings us to a great term for these places: the factory of inference. It's such a powerful way to think about it. It forces us to see AI for what it has become: a heavy industry. We are talking about giant buildings, packed with hardware, consuming electricity on the scale of an entire city. This is not weightless software floating in the ether.
Okay, so they built these massive, energy-guzzling factories. But this is where the story takes a violent turn, because AI's bottomless hunger for power is about to collide head-on with a global shockwave.
And what was the trigger? A regional war centered on Iran. All of a sudden, the Strait of Hormuz, that critical choke point for so much of the world's oil, is back in the headlines, and the entire global economy is on a knife's edge.
And you can see the impact right away. Energy prices just exploded. U.S. crude jumped over 11%. Suddenly, the tech industry's thirst for electricity wasn't just some technical problem to solve. It was happening in a world of expensive, vulnerable energy and escalating military conflict.
And this brings us to the climax of the story. This is the moment a theoretical risk becomes a very real, very physical threat. This is when the placeless digital cloud suddenly gets a physical street address.
Iran's Revolutionary Guards didn't just make vague threats. They explicitly named 18 major U.S. firms as targets. And look at this list: Apple, Google, Meta, Microsoft, the very companies that had spent decades building an image of being placeless, of floating above messy geopolitics. Well, that image was just shattered.
And look at how fast it all unraveled. In January, the conflict spikes energy prices. Just 1 month later, in February, those tech firms are officially named as targets. And by March, the threat becomes horrifyingly real. Amazon's cloud facility in Bahrain is hit in an attack. A data center had just become a coordinate on a battlefield map.
This moment changed everything. The fantasy of a protected, insulated digital world, it just evaporated. It was replaced by a hard, physical truth. These cloud facilities were exposed industrial infrastructure just as real and just as vulnerable as a port or an oil refinery.
This all leads us to the central, brutal irony of the situation. The tech giants were, in the most classic sense of the phrase, hoist with their own petard.
Now, what does that actually mean? It's the idea of being harmed or even destroyed by the very plan you came up with to get ahead. It's your own brilliant device blowing up in your face. And as you're about to see, it describes this situation to a T.
Let's just walk through the causal chain, because it's a straight line. 1. The money flows to get a friendly political environment. 2. That environment allows for a massive industrial build-out. 3. That exact same political closeness drags them into a global conflict. And 4. Their brand new infrastructure becomes a strategic liability. Their greatest gain and their greatest exposure came from the exact same choice.
So what's the ultimate lesson here? It points to a new, much harsher reality for tech power. A reality that was born from what the source perfectly describes as digitally clouded judgment.
This quote really gets to the absolute heart of the matter. Their platforms live in code, yet their power lives in territory. Tech companies sell us this dream of a borderless world living in pure code. But their actual dominance, it completely depends on physical, territorial things like power grids, shipping lanes, and yes, military protection.
And this is the bottom line. It's a textbook case of digitally clouded judgment. The masters of the cloud got so mesmerized by their own digital abstraction that they lost sight of the solid world. They wanted to get close to power, but they made a fatal mistake. They mistook that proximity for immunity from consequence.
And so that leaves us with a final, pretty unsettling question. When the servers that run our digital lives become military targets, where does the cloud actually end, and where does the battlefield begin? It's a stark reminder that in our world, even the most virtual industries have a very heavy and very real physical footprint. Thanks for watching.